The maintenance corridor on level 7 of Crossroads Anchorage was quiet, which was exactly why Dae-hyun liked eating lunch there. The distant hum of air recyclers and the occasional clank of pipes made for peaceful background noise. He sat on an overturned toolbox unwrapping the rice balls he had made that morning in his tiny quarters. Working as a contract engineer on the station meant long hours fixing broken equipment for species he could barely pronounce the names of. But it paid well, and more importantly, it kept him busy. Busy meant he didn't have to think about Earth, about the family he had left behind, or about why he preferred the cold metal walls of a space station to the home he grew up in. He was halfway through his first rice ball when he heard it. A small sound barely louder than a breath. Scratching, maybe. Or whimpering. Dae-hyun froze, listening. There it was again, coming from behind the stack of cargo containers at the end of the corridor. He stood slowly, setting his lunch aside. "Hello?" he called out in standard Galactic. No response. But something moved in the shadows between the containers. Dae-hyun approached carefully. The station had its share of dangerous creatures, both animal and sentient. He reached for the plasma torch on his belt, not to use as a weapon, but just in case. When he peered around the containers, he saw her. A small alien child, no taller than his waist, huddled against the wall. Her skin was a pale blue-gray that seemed to shimmer weakly in the dim corridor light. Patterns of darker blue ran along her arms and face, but they looked faded, like old paint left in the sun. Her large eyes, almost entirely black, stared up at him with pure terror. She was clearly not human, but she was just as clearly a frightened child. "Hey," Dae-hyun said softly, switching to the gentler tone he used with nervous customers. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The child pressed herself harder against the wall. She was trembling. Now that he was closer, Dae-hyun could see more details. She wore what looked like the remnants of a gray jumpsuit, torn and stained. Her thin arms showed the sharp angles of malnourishment, and there, on her left forearm, was an angry red burn mark. Something twisted in Dae-hyun's chest. He had seen poverty and suffering on Earth before he left, but somehow seeing it here, on a station that catered to the wealthy and powerful, felt worse. He slowly crouched down, making himself smaller and less threatening. "Are you hungry?" he asked, gesturing to his mouth and then his stomach. The child's eyes flickered toward him, then away. But he saw something there. Recognition, understanding. Hope, maybe. Moving very slowly, Dae-hyun backed away toward his toolbox. The child watched his every movement. He picked up one of his rice balls and held it out, staying several feet away from her. "Here," he said. "Food, you can have it." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the child moved. It was like watching a starving animal approach a trap. Knowing the danger but unable to resist the need, she crept forward on unsteady legs, reached out with a 3-fingered hand and snatched the rice ball from his palm. She retreated immediately, shoving the food into her mouth with desperate speed. Small sounds of relief came from her throat as she ate. The rice ball vanished in seconds. Dae-hyun's heart broke a little. He went back to his toolbox and brought the rest of his lunch. 3 more rice balls, a container of seasoned vegetables, and a bottle of water. He set them on the floor between them and stepped back. The child stared at the food, then at him. Her eyes were wide, disbelieving. "Take it," he said. "All of it. You need it more than I do." She moved forward again, slower this time. She gathered the food containers against her chest like precious treasure. But she didn't eat yet. Instead, she looked up at him and made a sound. It was musical, almost like 3 notes played together. Then she touched her chest with one hand. "Lyra," she said in a small, raspy voice. Dae-hyun smiled. "Lyra, that's your name?" He touched his own chest. "Dae-hyun, Dae-hyun," she repeated carefully. "That's right." He gestured to the food. "Eat, Lyra, it's okay." She needed no more encouragement. She sat right there on the floor and ate with the same desperate speed as before, though she seemed to be trying to slow down, to savor it. Dae-hyun watched, making sure no one else came down the corridor. As she ate, he noticed the burn on her arm again. It looked fresh, maybe a day or 2 old. Without thinking, he knelt down and pulled his repair kit from his belt. Station engineers carried basic medical supplies along with their tools. You never knew when you might cut yourself on sharp metal or get burned by a malfunctioning power coupling. "Let me see your arm," he said gently, showing her his own arm and then pointing to hers. Lyra hesitated but then extended her injured arm. Dae-hyun cleaned the burn carefully with antiseptic gel and covered it with a synthetic skin patch. She winced but didn't pull away. "There," he said when he finished. Better? Lyra looked at the bandage, then at him. Her eyes seemed to shimmer, getting brighter. The dark patterns on her skin pulsed with light for just a moment. Then she made that musical sound again, 3 notes in harmony. Daehyun didn't know what it meant, but it felt like gratitude. He checked his wrist display. His lunch break was almost over. He had to get back to work or risk losing his contract. He stood up, and Lyra's eyes followed him with sudden panic. I have to go, he said. But you stay here, okay? Stay hidden. He paused. What was he promising? I'll come back later. I'll bring more food. He didn't know if she understood everything he said, but she nodded slowly. Daehyun gathered his empty toolbox and walked toward the corridor exit. He looked back once. Lyra was still sitting there, clutching the water bottle, watching him with those impossibly dark eyes. Something told him his quiet, simple life on the station was about to get complicated, but as he returned to work, he couldn't stop thinking about her. Where were her parents? Why was she alone? How long had she been hungry? He pushed the questions aside and focused on his work. He had power couplings to replace and circuits to test, but in the back of his mind he was already planning. He would buy extra food at the market after his shift. He would come back to check on her. Maybe he could find out where she belonged, get her help through proper channels. It was just a simple act of kindness, he told himself. Just giving food to a hungry child. How could that possibly change anything? He had no idea that the moment Lyra accepted his rice ball, he had set in motion events that would upend his entire existence. He had no idea that somewhere on the station, a desperate father was searching frantically for his missing daughter. And he certainly had no idea that by feeding Lyra without asking for anything in return, he had just invoked an ancient law that would bind him to a complete stranger for the rest of his life. All of that would come tomorrow. For now, Daehyun just worked, replacing a faulty plasma relay and trying not to think about a small alien child hiding in the shadows, alone and afraid. But he kept his promise. After his shift ended, he bought twice as much food as usual. And he made his way back to level 7, hoping she would still be there. Part 2, the declaration. The next morning started like any other. Daehyun woke to the soft beep of his alarm, showered in the cramped bathroom that barely had room to turn around, and made breakfast in his kitchen unit that was really just a hot plate and a small refrigeration box. His quarters were tiny even by station standards, but they were his, and that was enough. He was spreading jam on toast when someone knocked on his door. Not the soft chime that usually announced visitors, but actual physical pounding, heavy, insistent, and loud enough to rattle the thin metal frame. Daehyun frowned. No one ever visited him. He wasn't the social type, and his work kept him too busy for friendships. He walked to the door and checked the small view screen mounted beside it. His heart stopped. Standing in the corridor outside was the largest alien he had ever seen in person. The being stood at least 7 feet tall with the same blue-gray skin as Lyra, but where hers had been pale and faded, his was deep and vibrant. Dark patterns covered his arms and face in intricate designs that seemed to move and flow. He wore armor, or what looked like armor, made of dark metal plates over a fitted bodysuit. His face was angular and sharp with those same large black eyes, but his held an intensity that made Daehyun's hands shake. This was clearly the same species as Lyra, and based on the way his face was set in hard, serious lines, he was not here for a friendly chat. Daehyun considered not opening the door, but the alien knew he was inside. The view screen was two-way. They were already looking at each other. Taking a deep breath, Daehyun pressed the door release. The door slid open, and the alien stepped forward immediately. Daehyun stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his own feet. The being was even more imposing up close. Scars crisscrossed his arms and neck, evidence of a violent past. "You are Daehyun," the alien said. It wasn't a question. His voice was deep and resonant, speaking standard Galactic with a heavy accent that made each word sound formal and ancient. "Yes," Daehyun managed. "I'm Daehyun. Who are you? What do you want?" The alien stepped fully into the room, and the door slid shut behind him. He looked around the small space, his eyes taking in every detail. Then he looked down at Daehyun, and something in his expression softened just slightly. "I am Torval of the Valkyrie," he said, "and I have come to pledge myself to you." Daehyun blinked. "You've come to what?" "You fed my daughter," Torval continued, as if that explained everything. "You gave her sustenance when she was starving. You tended her wounds when she was injured. You asked for nothing in return. You are not of our people, yet you honored the ancient ways without knowing them. Wait, Daehyun said, holding up his hands. Your daughter? You mean Lyra? The little girl I found yesterday? Yes, Lyra is my child. My only child. Torvald's expression grew pained. She wandered away while I searched for work. I have been looking for her since yesterday morning. When I finally found her last night, she told me what you did. She showed me the food you gave her, the medicine you used on her burn. She sang your name. She sang my name. It is how we show gratitude among my people. The three-note song. It means you have touched our heart. Torvald placed a large hand over his chest. You saved her life, Daehyun of Earth. Without your kindness, she would have died. I know this truth. Daehyun felt uncomfortable with the weight of those words. I just gave her some food. Anyone would have done the same. No, Torvald said firmly. They would not. She hid in that corridor for 2 days. Many beings passed her. None stopped. None helped. Only you. Okay, well, I'm glad she's all right, Daehyun said. But I don't understand what you mean by pledging yourself to me. Torvald drew himself up to his full height. When he spoke, his voice took on a ritual quality, as if reciting words passed down through generations. You have invoked the Kaltaresh, the sacred bond of sustenance. By feeding my blood without expectation of payment, you have saved not just her life, but the honor of my family line. According to the ancient laws of my people, I now belong to you. I am your bonded guardian, your sworn protector, your loyal servant. Where you go, I follow. What you need, I provide. Your enemies are my enemies. Your family is my family. This bond cannot be broken except by death. Daehyun stared at him. Then he laughed, a nervous, disbelieving sound. You're joking, right? This is some kind of cultural misunderstanding. Torvald's expression didn't change. I do not joke about matters of honor. But I don't need a guardian or a servant or whatever, Daehyun said, his voice rising. I was just helping a kid. That's all. No bond, no pledge, no ancient laws. Just basic human decency. I understand this is unexpected, Torvald said. But the law is clear. You may not know our ways, but that does not change them. The Kaltaresh has been invoked. I am bound to you now. Well, I release you, Daehyun said firmly. There, bond broken. You're free to go. Torvald shook his head slowly. It does not work that way. To refuse the bond is to mark my daughter as dead abandoned. She would be shamed, cast out. No Velkari would ever help her or acknowledge her existence. She would be worse than dead. Daehyun felt his stomach sink. That's insane. That is our law, Torvald said simply. Our ways are old. Older than your species' space travel. They are binding. But I'm not Velkari, Daehyun protested. Why should your laws apply to me? Because you performed a Velkari sacred act. The universe does not care about your intentions. Only your actions. Torvald moved to the small window and looked out at the station's interior. I did not choose this either, human. I was a fleet commander once. I led ships in battle. I had honor and rank and purpose. Now I am a refugee with nothing but my daughter and my sworn word. But I will keep that word because it is all I have left. Something in his tone made Daehyun pause. He studied the alien's scarred profile, the way he held himself with rigid military posture despite his obvious weariness. Why are you a refugee? Daehyun asked quietly. Torvald was silent for a long moment. My government ordered actions I could not in honor perform. I refused. They declared me a traitor. I took Lyra and fled. He looked back at Daehyun. We have been running for 6 months. I have been searching for work on this station for 3 days. I have been rejected by every employer. They see my species and turn me away. Yesterday, I left Lyra in what I thought was a safe place while I went to the far side of the station for a job interview. When I returned, she was gone. And she wandered to level 7, Daehyun said. Yes, hungry, frightened, and alone. Until you found her. Torvald turned to face him fully. I understand you do not want this bond. But I am asking you, one father to one man with compassion, please do not refuse it. Please do not shame my daughter for my failures. Daehyun ran his hands through his hair, pacing in the small space. This was crazy. Absolutely crazy. He had just wanted to help a hungry kid, and now he had some kind of alien warrior pledging eternal service to him? How was this his life? But when he looked at Torvald, he saw something he recognized. Desperation. The desperate love of a parent who would do anything, endure anything, for their child. Daehyun had left Earth because he couldn't handle the suffocating expectations of family. But he understood what family meant to those who valued it. "Where is Lyra now?" he asked. "Waiting outside," Torvald said. "I told her to stay hidden until I spoke with you." "Bring her in." Torvald moved to the door and made a soft clicking sound. A moment later, Lyra slipped into the room. She looked much better than yesterday. Her skin had more color, and the patterns on her arms were brighter. She was clean, and she wore a simple tunic that was too large for her. When she saw Daehyun, her whole face lit up and she made that 3-note song again. Despite everything, Daehyun smiled. "Hey, Lyra." She ran to him and wrapped her thin arms around his waist, hugging him tightly. Daehyun stood there awkwardly, not sure what to do with his hands. Finally, he patted her head gently. "Okay," he said, looking at Torvald over Lyra's head. "Okay. I don't fully understand this bond thing, and I think it's crazy, but I'm not going to be the reason a kid gets hurt, so I guess we need to figure this out." Torvald placed his hand over his heart and bowed his head. "You honor me, Daehyun of Earth. I am yours now. I will serve you with my life." "Yeah, we're going to have to work on that whole serve you thing," Daehyun muttered. "But first I need breakfast. And apparently, I need to figure out where 2 Velkari are going to sleep." He looked around his tiny quarters and sighed. This was going to be complicated. Part 3. Unlikely Cohabitation. The first week was a disaster. Daehyun had never lived with anyone before, not since leaving Earth. He liked his space, his routine, his quiet. Now his tiny quarters felt like they were bursting at the seams with 2 aliens who had very different ideas about personal boundaries and daily life. Torvald refused to sleep on the fold-out bed Daehyun bought. Instead, he insisted on sleeping on the floor near the door, claiming it was a guardian's proper place. He also insisted on preparing all meals, cleaning the entire quarters twice a day and standing watch while Daehyun slept. The first morning, Daehyun woke up to find Torvald standing perfectly still beside his bed, just watching him. "What are you doing?" Daehyun had asked, his heart racing. "Ensuring your safety," Torvald replied, as if this was completely normal. "I'm safe in my own bed. Please stop watching me sleep." Lyra at least was easier. She was curious about everything. She followed Daehyun around the quarters, asking questions in her limited standard Galactic. She touched his tablet computer with wonder, watched him make coffee with fascination, and tried to help with everything, even when her help made things more complicated. On the 3rd day, Daehyun came home from work to find his quarters spotlessly clean and dinner waiting. The smell hit him as soon as the door opened, something savory and rich with spices he didn't recognize. Torvald stood in the small kitchen area stirring a pot. "I traded some of my old armor pieces for ingredients," he said. "It is not much, but it is proper food." Daehyun set down his tool bag and approached cautiously. The pot contained a thick stew with chunks of something that looked like meat and vegetables. His stomach growled despite his wariness. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yes, I did," Torvald replied. "It is my duty to provide for you." They ate together at the small table with Lyra sitting on a stack of boxes to reach. The stew was delicious, better than anything Daehyun usually made for himself. He ate 2 bowls before he realized what he was doing. "This is really good," he admitted. Lyra made her happy 3-note sound. Torvald simply nodded, but Daehyun thought he saw something like satisfaction in the alien's eyes. After dinner, while Torvald cleaned the dishes, Daehyun pulled out his tablet and some basic learning programs he had downloaded. He called Lyra over. "Want to learn some math?" he asked. She tilted her head, confused. Daehyun pulled up a simple program with numbers and basic addition. He showed her how it worked, using his fingers to count. Lyra watched intently, her dark eyes following every movement. Within minutes, she was solving problems on her own. Within an hour, she had moved through 3 levels of the program. Daehyun stared at her in amazement. "You're really smart," he said. Lyra beamed at him. She pointed to herself and said, "Smart." Then she pointed to him and said, "Teacher." Something warm spread through Daehyun's chest. He ruffled her hair gently and she leaned into his touch. From the kitchen, Torvald watched them. His expression was complicated. Layers of emotion Daehyun couldn't read. But when he spoke, his voice was soft. "She has not smiled like that in many months," he said. "Thank you." "She's a good kid," Daehyun replied. "Yes, she is all I have." Torvald dried the last dish and set it aside. He stood there for a moment, then asked, "May I tell you a story?" Daehyun gestured to the chair across from him. Sure. Torval sat down, his large frame making the chair look tiny. He folded his hands on the table, and when he spoke, his voice took on that ritual quality again. The Velkari are an old people, he began. We have traveled the stars for 10,000 years. We have built empires and watched them fall. We have made war and peace in equal measure. But through all of that time, we have kept certain laws sacred. The Kaltaresh is one of the oldest. Why is feeding someone such a big deal? Daehyun asked. Because food is life, Torval said simply. In the old days, before we had technology, before we traveled space, our people lived in harsh deserts. Food was scarce. Water was precious. To share your food with someone who was starving, especially a child, was to give them a piece of your own life. It was the highest form of kindness. He paused, looking at Lyra, who was still absorbed in the math program. The law states that if someone feeds a family member in need, without asking for payment or reward, they become part of that family's honor. The debt must be repaid, but not with money or goods. With loyalty, with service, with life itself if necessary. That seems extreme, Daehyun said. Perhaps, but it kept us alive during the hard times. It taught us that kindness deserves the ultimate respect. Torval met his eyes. I was not always a refugee, Daehyun. I commanded a battle fleet. I had 300 ships under my authority. I was respected, feared, honored. What happened? Torval's hands tightened on the table. My government decided to expand our territory. There was a small colony world, inhabited by a species that had barely achieved spaceflight. Peaceful people, simple farmers. My orders were to destroy their cities and claim the planet. Daehyun felt cold. And you refused. I refused. I told my superiors that this was murder, not war, that we were better than this. They told me to follow orders or face execution for treason. He looked down at his scarred hands. I took my personal ship, gathered Lyra, and ran. Most of my crew stayed behind. Some followed me and died when our ship was attacked. We barely escaped. I'm sorry, Daehyun said quietly. Do not be sorry. I made the choice I could live with. But it cost me everything. My position, my honor in the eyes of my people, my home, my wife. His voice cracked slightly on that last word. Your wife? She died 5 years ago. Illness, it was just Lyra and me after that. Torval straightened up, pushing emotion back down. Now we have nothing. Except each other. And now because of your kindness, we have you. Daehyun didn't know what to say to that. He looked at Lyra, then at Torval, and felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. He hadn't asked for this. He hadn't wanted to be responsible for anyone. But here they were. Tell me more about your people, he said finally. If we're going to make this work, I should understand your culture. Torval nodded slowly. What would you like to know? They talked late into the night. Torval told him about Velkari history, their customs, their language. He explained the color patterns on their skin, how they changed with emotion and health. He described their homeworld, a planet of red deserts and blue forests with cities carved into canyon walls. Daehyun shared things too, about Earth, about Korea, about the family he had left behind, about why he had chosen the isolation of space over the demands of home. Your people have honor too, Torval said. Different from ours, but I see it in you. The duty to family, the respect for elders, the importance of education. He glanced at Lyra, now asleep with her head on the table. These are good values. I guess I never thought about it like that, Daehyun admitted. I spent so long trying to get away from all that pressure. Sometimes we must leave home to understand what home means, Torval said. He stood and gently lifted Lyra, cradling her against his chest. She stirred but didn't wake. I will put her to bed. After Torval had settled Lyra on the fold-out bed and taken his position on the floor by the door, Daehyun lay in his own bed, staring at the ceiling. His quarters felt different now, fuller, warmer maybe. The silence wasn't quite as empty. He thought about what Torval had said. About kindness deserving respect, about family being more than blood, about the choices we make defining who we are. Maybe this bond thing wasn't the worst thing that could have happened. Maybe in some strange way they needed each other. The next morning, Daehyun woke up to the smell of breakfast cooking and the sound of Lyra singing softly in her language. Torval was not standing guard beside his bed, which felt like progress. Over breakfast, Daehyun made a decision. I'm going to talk to my supervisor today, he said. See if there's any work on the station you could do, Torval. You shouldn't have to sell your belongings to buy food. Torval looked surprised. You would do this? Well, yeah. I mean, if you're stuck with me, we might as well make the best of it, right? For the first time since they met, Torval smiled. It was small, barely there, but real. Thank you, he said simply. Lyra clapped her hands and made her 3-note song. Daehyun found himself smiling too. Maybe this could work after all. Part 4. External Threats. 3 weeks had passed since Torval and Lyra moved in, and Daehyun had almost gotten used to the new routine. Almost. He was eating breakfast when his comm unit buzzed. His supervisor wanted to see him immediately. That was never good. Daehyun found his supervisor in the main engineering office, along with 2 Velkari he had never seen before. They wore dark uniforms with military-style markings and carried weapons openly on their belts. Their skin patterns were sharp and aggressive, pulsing with darker colors. Daehyun, his supervisor said, a nervous edge to his voice. These officers have some questions for you. The taller Velkari stepped forward. His eyes were cold, calculating. You live in quarters on Level 3, Section 7, Unit 24, yes? Yes, Daehyun said carefully. Why? We are searching for a criminal. A traitor to the Velkari Empire. He may have a young female child with him. The officer pulled up a holographic image from his wrist device. It showed Torval, but younger, wearing military uniform and decorations. Have you seen this male? Daehyun's blood ran cold, but he kept his face neutral. What did he do? That is not your concern, human. Have you seen him or not? Lots of Velkari pass through the station, Daehyun said carefully. I fix equipment. I don't really pay attention to faces. The officer studied him for a long moment. If you see him, you will report it to station security immediately. There is a substantial reward for information leading to his capture. Sure, Daehyun said. I'll keep an eye out. The officers left, but not before giving Daehyun one more suspicious look. His supervisor waited until they were gone, then let out a breath. Those guys give me the creeps, he said. What did this traitor do anyway? No idea, Daehyun lied. I'm gonna get back to work. But he didn't go back to work. He went straight to his quarters, moving as fast as he could without running. His mind raced. How had they found the station? Had someone recognized Torval? Had they been tracking him all along? He burst through his door to find Torval teaching Lyra how to read Standard Galactic. They both looked up in surprise at his sudden entrance. We have a problem, Daehyun said, and explained what had just happened. Torval's expression went carefully blank, but his skin patterns darkened with fear and anger. He stood slowly, placing himself between Daehyun and Lyra. They have found us, he said quietly. I must leave. Take Lyra and disappear before they connect me to you. No, Daehyun said. Daehyun, you do not understand. They will not just arrest me. They will make me disappear. And anyone who helped me will face the same fate. I said no. Daehyun paced the small room, thinking. You told me about the Kaltaresh. You said you belong to me now, right? That my enemies are your enemies? Yes, but then that means it works both ways. Your enemies are my enemies, and I'm not letting them take you or Lyra. He stopped pacing and looked at Torval directly. Besides, I know someone who might be able to help. 10 minutes later, Daehyun was knocking on a door 3 levels up. When it opened, a woman in her early 30s stared at him in surprise. She had short dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes behind thin glasses. Daehyun, what are you doing here? Hi, Jiwon, he said. I need your help. Can I come in? Jiwon worked in data management for the station. Daehyun had met her months ago when he was fixing terminals in her department. They had talked a few times, shared lunch once or twice. She was smart and funny, and Daehyun had almost worked up the courage to ask her out properly before everything got complicated. Now he stood in her quarters, explaining the situation as quickly as he could. Jiwon listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each detail. So let me get this straight, she said when he finished. You accidentally triggered some ancient alien custom? Now you have a war criminal and his daughter living with you, and bounty hunters are searching the station? They're not bounty hunters. They're military officers. And Torval isn't a criminal. He refused to commit genocide. That's actually worse, Daehyun. The Velkari government has treaties with the Galactic Union. If they request extradition for a military deserter, the station will comply. Jiwon sat down at her computer terminal, fingers already flying over the keys. Give me their names. Full names if you know them. Will you help? Daehyun asked. She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You're asking me to risk my job, possibly my freedom, to hide refugees from a foreign government. Yes. And you're doing this because it's the right thing to do. Because they're family now, I guess. Daehyun ran his hands through his hair. I know it sounds crazy. I know I haven't explained this well. But Jiwon, if you could see Lyra, if you could hear what Torval went through, they don't deserve this. Jiwon was quiet for a moment. Then she turned back to her computer. Torval of the Velkari and his daughter Lyra, she said. Anything else I should know? Relief flooded through Daehyun. Thank you. Really, thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm just looking at options. Her fingers moved rapidly across the keyboard. Okay, here's what I can see. The Velkari government filed a request with station security 2 days ago. They claim Torval is a deserter who stole military secrets. They want him detained and returned for trial. He didn't steal anything. He just refused to kill civilians. I believe you. But legally that doesn't matter. She pulled up more screens. However, there might be a loophole. If Torval can claim political asylum under the Humanitarian Protection Act, the station would be required to hold a hearing before extraditing him. That would buy time. How do we do that? He needs to be registered under the protection of a station resident or business, someone who can vouch for him and provide legal sponsorship. Jiwon looked at Daehyun. That would be you, since he's living in your quarters. Okay, let's do it. There's a catch. Once you register him, his presence becomes public record. Right now, those officers are searching quietly. Once this goes official, they'll know exactly where he is. Daehyun thought about it. Can you falsify his records? Make it look like he's been registered for months with a different identity? Jiwon raised an eyebrow. That's illegal. Is it more illegal than what they want to do to him? She smiled slightly. Good point. It'll take me a few hours, but I can create a backdated registration. I'll need his biometric data and a fake identity. They worked quickly. Daehyun went back to his quarters and explained the plan to Torval, who was reluctant but agreed. Jiwon created a false identity, making Torval into a civilian worker named Kalran who had been on the station for 6 months. She planted records in the system, created false documentation, and made it look completely legitimate. It should have worked. But 3 days later, Daehyun returned from work to find his door forced open and his quarters ransacked. Torval was standing in the center of the room, Lyra behind him facing the 2 Velkari officers. One of them had a weapon drawn. Step away from the child, the officer said. You are under arrest for desertion and theft of military property. Daehyun stepped into the room. What's going on here? Stay out of this, human. This is Velkari business. Actually, it's my business, Daehyun said, his heart pounding. This is my quarters. You're trespassing. We have authorization from station security to search for a wanted criminal. Then you have the wrong person. This is Kalran, a civilian worker. Check your records. The officer smiled coldly. We did check. Very interesting records, too. Created just 3 days ago by someone with access to the station's main database. Did you think we would not notice? Daehyun's stomach dropped. Now step aside, or we will arrest you as an accomplice. Everything happened very fast after that. Torval moved like lightning, striking the officer's weapon arm and sending the gun flying. The second officer lunged forward, but Torval was faster. He fought with precision and power, every movement economical and deadly. These were not just soldiers. They were hunters. But Torval had been a commander. He had trained warriors just like them. Within seconds, both officers were disarmed and on the floor. But more were coming. Daehyun could hear boots pounding in the corridor outside. The ventilation shaft, Daehyun said suddenly. In the bathroom. It connects to the maintenance tunnels. Torval grabbed Lyra and they ran. Daehyun pulled open the bathroom panel, revealing the shaft behind it. It was tight, but they could fit. Go, Torval said. I will hold them off. No, Daehyun said. We go together. That's an order. Torval stared at him for a moment, then nodded. They climbed into the shaft just as more officers burst into the quarters. The sound of shouting and weapons fire followed them into the darkness, but they kept moving, crawling through the narrow space until they reached a junction that led down into the maintenance levels. They didn't stop until they were 3 levels down, in a section of the station most people didn't even know existed. There, in the dark among the pipes and cables, Daehyun pulled out his comm unit and called Jiwon. "We have a problem," he said. "I know," she replied. "I'm watching it happen on the security feeds. They've declared a station-wide search. Taehyun, this is bad. Can you help?" There was a pause. Then, "Meet me at junction point 7 in the maintenance level. I'm coming to you." They waited in the darkness, Lyra holding on to both Daehyun and her father. After what felt like hours, Ji-won appeared carrying a bag of supplies. "I brought food and some equipment. Part 5. The hearing, the Galactic Union office on Crossroads Anchorage, was impressive. Large windows overlooked the station's central hub, where thousands of beings from hundreds of species moved through the massive space. Inside, the walls displayed the Union symbol, a circle containing stars representing the member worlds. Daehyun sat in an uncomfortable chair, watching officials move back and forth. Torval and Lyra sat beside him with Ji-won on his other side. They had been waiting for 3 hours. Finally, a door opened and a tall, thin alien with gray skin and forearms gestured to them. "The magistrate will see you now." The hearing room was smaller than Daehyun expected. A long table sat at the front where 3 magistrates were seated. A human woman in formal diplomatic robes, a crystalline being that seemed to shimmer with internal light, and a reptilian creature with dark green scales. Behind them, the Velkari government had sent 2 representatives, lawyers in formal dress who looked at Torval with barely concealed hatred. And in the back row, Daehyun was surprised to see a Korean woman in her 50s, wearing the formal attire of an Earth diplomat. She caught his eye and gave a small nod. The human magistrate, who introduced herself as Magistrate Park, called the hearing to order. "We are here to determine the legal status of Torval of the Velkari, who has requested political asylum under the Humanitarian Protection Act. The Velkari government has filed for his immediate extradition on charges of military desertion and theft of state secrets." She looked at Torval. "You may speak." Torval stood, his posture military straight. When he spoke, his voice was clear and strong. "I served in the Velkari Imperial Fleet for 23 years. I rose to the rank of fleet commander. I led forces in 12 campaigns and earned 37 commendations for valor and tactical excellence. I loved my service. I believed in protecting my people." He paused and his skin patterns darkened with pain. 8 months ago, my government ordered me to take my fleet to a colony world called Tarash. The inhabitants were a peaceful species, early in their technological development. They had no weapons capable of resisting us. My orders were simple: destroy their cities, remove them from the planet so we could claim it for settlement. The Velkari lawyers started to object, but Magistrate Park raised her hand for silence. "I refused," Torval continued. "I told my superiors this was not a military action. It was mass murder. They told me to follow orders or face execution for treason. I chose exile. I took my daughter and ran. But before I left, I recorded evidence of the planned attack, transmitted it to 3 different news services. Lies," one of the Velkari lawyers shouted. "He stole classified military data and—" "The attack on Tarash proceeded without me," Torval said, his voice rising. "They found another commander who would follow orders. 3 months after I fled, Tarash was destroyed. 5 million beings killed. Their cities burned. Their world claimed. And my government told the Galactic Union it was an unfortunate conflict, a necessary action against aggressive expansion." The room fell silent. "Do you have proof of this?" the crystalline magistrate asked, their voice like bells chiming. "I have tactical records, communications, orders bearing the seal of the High Command." Torval pulled a small data device from his belt. "Everything is here." The Velkari lawyers looked panicked. "This hearing is about desertion, not about policy decisions made by our government. Torval is a traitor who stole classified information. Under our treaty, he must be returned for trial." Magistrate Park took the data device and handed it to an assistant. "We will review this evidence. But first, I want to hear from the person who filed the asylum request on Torval's behalf." "Daehyun of Earth?" Daehyun stood, his legs shaky. He had never been good at public speaking. But he thought about Lyra, about Torval's stories, about everything they had been through together. "I'm not a politician or a lawyer," he began. "I'm just an engineer. I fix things. A few weeks ago, I found a hungry child hiding in a maintenance corridor. I gave her some food. I didn't know I was invoking some ancient law. I just saw a kid who needed help." He looked at the magistrates. "Her father came to me the next day and said that by feeding his child, I had created a bond between us. He said he belonged to me now by the laws of his people. I thought it was crazy. I tried to refuse, but he explained that refusing would shame his daughter, mark her as abandoned, so I let them stay with me. And now you are hiding a wanted criminal, one of the Velkari lawyers said. I'm protecting my family. Dae-hyun replied, because that's what they are now, family. Torvald told me about the bond we have. He said my enemies are his enemies. Well, it works both ways. His enemies are my enemies. And I refuse to hand him over to people who want to kill him for refusing to commit genocide. The reptilian magistrate leaned forward. You are human. You have no obligation to follow Velkari customs. Maybe not legally, Dae-hyun said. But morally? Torvald saved my life 3 days ago when those officers tried to arrest him in my quarters. He could have run. He could have left me behind. But he stayed and fought to protect me. Because that's what family does. He turned to look at the Velkari lawyers. You want to talk about honor and duty? Torvald has more honor in one hand than your entire government. He refused to kill innocent people. He chose his conscience over his career. That's not treason. That's courage. Magistrate Park studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at Ji-won. And you? What is your involvement? Ji-won stood. I work in data management on the station. I helped create false records to hide Torvald's identity. I knew it was illegal. I did it anyway. Why? Because I looked at the evidence. I saw what the Velkari government was planning. I saw what they did to Tarash, and I realized that sometimes following the law means supporting something evil. I'd rather break the law than be complicit in genocide. The Velkari lawyers were shouting now, demanding that the asylum request be denied, that Torvald be arrested immediately. But Magistrate Park ignored them. She was looking at the back of the room, at the Korean diplomat who had been sitting quietly. Ambassador Hye-jin, she said, you represent Earth's diplomatic mission. Do you wish to make a statement? The ambassador stood and walked to the front of the room. She moved with calm authority, her presence commanding attention. I do, Magistrate. Thank you. She looked at Dae-hyun, then at Torvald. I have been listening to this hearing with great interest. The Velkari custom of Kaltoresh is not so different from concepts we have on Earth. In Korea, where I and these humans come from, we have strong traditions of familial duty, of repaying kindness, of protecting those who cannot protect themselves. She turned to address the magistrates directly. The Velkari government calls Torvald a traitor, but by whose definition? He refused to participate in the mass murder of civilians. In doing so, he upheld the very principles that the Galactic Union was founded on. Principles of protecting innocent life, of refusing to follow orders that violate basic morality. Ambassador, with respect, the reptilian magistrate said, this is a matter of Velkari law. No, Hye-jin said firmly. This is a matter of universal law. The law that says genocide is wrong. The law that says following orders is not an excuse for war crimes. The law that says refugees fleeing persecution deserve protection. She picked up a tablet and brought up images. Tarash before the attack. A peaceful world. Cities filled with families, children, ordinary beings living their lives. She changed the image. Tarash after. Burned. Destroyed. 5 million dead. The room was silent. If we return Torvald to the Velkari government, we are saying that this is acceptable. We are saying that anyone who refuses to participate in this kind of atrocity deserves punishment. Is that the message the Galactic Union wants to send? The magistrates conferred quietly among themselves. The Velkari lawyers tried to interrupt, but Magistrate Park silenced them with a look. Finally, she spoke. This hearing will recess for 2 hours while we review the evidence and consider the testimony. All parties will remain on the station. Everyone stood as the magistrates left. Dae-hyun felt exhausted, drained. Ji-won put a hand on his shoulder. You did good, she said quietly. Torvald was holding Lyra, who looked scared and confused. He met Dae-hyun's eyes. Whatever happens, thank you, he said. You have given us more than we deserved. Hope, dignity, family. We're not done yet, Dae-hyun replied. Ambassador Hye-jin approached them. I'm going to make some calls, she said. Put pressure on the magistrates. This evidence of the Tarash massacre is damning. The Union can't ignore it. Why are you helping us? Dae-hyun asked. She smiled slightly. Because you remind me why I became a diplomat. To help people. To stand up for what's right. And because that little girl deserves to grow up with her father. She looked at Lyra, who was watching her with those large, dark eyes. Besides, Heejin added, what you did for this family is very Korean. Taking in strangers, creating bonds of duty and respect, making family from kindness. Your parents would be proud even if you don't think they would be. Daehyun felt something catch in his throat. He hadn't talked to his parents in 2 years. Hadn't wanted to hear about how he was wasting his life in space when he should be home, married, working Part 6. Building a future 2 months had passed since the hearing, and life had settled into something resembling normal. Though normal, Daehyun reflected, now looked very different than it had before. He stood in the doorway of his quarters, no longer small and cramped. After the hearing, Ambassador Heejin had pulled some strings and the station administration had approved a transfer to larger family accommodations. Now they had 2 bedrooms, a proper kitchen, and a living space where Lyra could spread out her schoolwork without taking over the entire room. Torval had found work as a security consultant, advising the station on defensive systems and threat assessment. His military experience, once a source of shame, was now valued. The station captain had been impressed by how Torval handled the confrontation with the Velkari officers, calling his actions precise and professional. The pay was decent, and more importantly, it gave Torval purpose again. Daehyun watched him now, sitting at the table with a tablet, reviewing security protocols. There was a peace in Torval's expression that hadn't been there before. The constant tension, the fear of being found, had eased. His skin patterns were brighter, healthier. You are staring, Torval said without looking up. Just thinking, Daehyun replied, smiling. About? How much things have changed. A few months ago, I was eating lunch alone in a maintenance corridor. Now I have a family. Torval looked up at that, his dark eyes soft. Yes, now you have family. The door chimed and Lyra ran to answer it before anyone could stop her. She had gotten comfortable with their new safety, her natural curiosity returning. When she opened the door, Jiwon stood there carrying a bag of food containers. Hi, Lyra, Jiwon said cheerfully. Is your teacher home? Lyra giggled. She had started calling Daehyun teacher exclusively, and somehow it had spread to everyone else. Even Torval occasionally used it, though usually with an amused tone. Teacher is staring at father again, Lyra reported. I was not staring, Daehyun protested. Jiwon laughed as she entered, setting the food on the kitchen counter. Over the past month, she had become a regular visitor, stopping by 3 or 4 times a week. Sometimes she brought food, sometimes just her company. Daehyun had finally worked up the courage to officially ask her out, and to his surprise and delight, she had said yes immediately. I brought dinner from that new restaurant on level 5, she said, the one that does fusion cooking. Earth and Velkari recipes mixed together. That sounds terrible, Torval said, but he was already standing up, interested despite himself. They ate together, trying strange combinations of flavors. Some worked surprisingly well. Others made them all laugh at how bad they were. Lyra loved everything, eating with enthusiasm and asking questions about each ingredient. After dinner, while Torval cleaned up, Jiwon pulled Daehyun aside. I have news, she said quietly. The Union investigation into Tarash is complete. They've confirmed everything Torval said. The Velkari government is being formally charged with war crimes. That's good, right? Yes and no. It means they'll face sanctions, possible military intervention, but it also means Torval will need to testify at a major hearing, in front of the full Galactic Council. Daehyun looked over at Torval, who was showing Lyra the proper way to dry dishes. Will he be safe? The Union will provide protection, but it's going to be difficult for him. Reliving all of that. Being in the spotlight, Jiwon touched his arm. He'll need his family around him. We'll be there, Daehyun said without hesitation. That evening, after Jiwon left and Lyra was in bed, Daehyun told Torval about the testimony. The Velkari warrior stood at the window, looking out at the station's interior, saying nothing for a long time. I knew this would come, he finally said, but I hoped I would have more time. Time to build a life here. Time to let Lyra feel truly safe. She is safe. We all are. And we'll stay safe together. Torval turned to look at him. You would come with me? To the council hearing? Of course. Your family. Something complicated passed across Torval's face. When I first came to you, when I declared the Kaltoresh, you thought it was crazy. You did not want this bond. I was scared, Daehyun admitted. Scared of responsibility. Of connection. I left Earth because I didn't want the weight of family expectations. I thought I was better off alone, and now? Now I know I was wrong. Family isn't a weight. It's a foundation. It's what makes everything else matter. Daehyun smiled. You and Lyra taught me that. Torval placed his hand over his heart in the Velkari gesture of deep respect. You honor me, teacher. More than you know. We honor each other. That's what family does. The next few weeks were busy. Torval prepared for his testimony, reviewing evidence and working with union prosecutors. Daehyun continued his engineering work, though he found himself taking on training duties, teaching younger engineers the skills he had learned. Lyra thrived in the station school, making friends among the diverse species and excelling in every subject. But something unexpected began happening. Word had spread about Daehyun and Torval, about the human who had honored Kaltoresh and the Velkari commander who had refused to commit genocide. Their story had become known throughout the station. Other Velkari began appearing. First one, then two, then a dozen. Refugees fleeing their government. Outcasts who had spoken against the war crimes. Families who couldn't support the Empire's actions. They came to the station looking for Torval, seeking guidance, hope, a community. Torval met with each of them in Daehyun's quarters, which quickly became too small again. So they started meeting in one of the station's public common areas. Within a month, there were 30 Velkari refugees on the station. Within 2 months, 50. They formed a community, helping each other find work and housing. Torval became their unofficial leader, though he insisted he was just another refugee. They called him the Honorable One and looked to him for wisdom and guidance. One evening, Daehyun found himself in the center of this community, sharing a meal with dozens of Velkari and other species who had been drawn to the group. Children played together, mixing languages and customs. Adults shared stories and helped each other with daily problems. It felt like what he imagined a village might have felt like in old Korea, the kind of tight-knit community his grandparents had described. Ambassador Hyejin visited during this gathering. She walked through the crowd, observing with interest. You've created something remarkable here, she told Daehyun. A true community. People from different worlds, different cultures coming together as family. It wasn't really me, Daehyun said. Torval did most of it. No, it started with you, with a simple act of feeding a hungry child. She smiled. That's very human, you know. We have this tendency to adopt beings who need help. Dogs, cats, aliens, whatever. We see someone in need and we just take them in. Is that a good thing? I think it might be humanity's best thing. Our greatest strength isn't our technology or our cleverness. It's our capacity for empathy. Our ability to look at someone completely different from us and see family. She gestured to the gathered beings. Look at this. You fed one child and now you're feeding dozens. You protected one family and now you're protecting a community. That ripple effect, that's the power of compassion. Daehyun looked around the room. He saw Lyra teaching human children a Velkari game. He saw Torval advising a young Velkari couple on finding work. He saw Jiwon helping organize a food distribution system. He saw dozens of beings from multiple species, all connected because one human engineer had shared his lunch. I just wanted to help, he said softly. Yes, and that's exactly why it worked. That night, after everyone had gone home and Lyra was asleep, Daehyun sat with Torval and Jiwon, drinking tea and talking quietly. The community is getting too big, Torval said. We need more organization. More resources. The station is accommodating us for now, but we need a long-term plan. What if we made it official? Jiwon suggested. Like a recognized refugee organization. We could apply for union funding, get legal protections, maybe even help process asylum claims for other Velkari. That would require someone to run it, Daehyun said. They both looked at him. Oh no, I'm an engineer, not an administrator. You're the one they all trust, Torval said. Human and Velkari alike. You brought us together. Jiwon would be better at it. I'll help, Jiwon said. But Torval is right. You're the center of this, the one who started it all. Daehyun thought about it. About the small maintenance corridor where he used to eat lunch alone. About the frightened child who had hidden in the shadows. About the warrior who had become his family. About all the beings who now looked to them for hope. Okay, he said finally. Let's do it. Let's build something that lasts. Torval placed his hand over his heart. Together. Together. Jiwon echoed, taking Daehyun's hand. Daehyun smiled. Yeah, together. Outside the window, the station continued its endless rotation, a small point of light in the vast darkness of space. Inside, a family and a community were being built. One meal, one act of kindness, one connection at a time. And somewhere on Earth, Daehyun's mother received a message from her son for the first time in 2 years. It contained a photo of Daehyun standing with a large blue alien and a small alien child, all smiling. The message read, "Mom, I want you to meet my family. I know it's been a long time and I'm sorry. But I think I finally understand part 7. The ripple effect. 6 months after the hearing, Daehyun stood in a conference room watching news feeds from across the galaxy. The Galactic Council had finished its investigation. The evidence of what happened on Tarash was undeniable. Images filled the screens. Cities before and after. Testimony from the few survivors who had escaped. And tomorrow, Torval would testify before the full council. Broadcast live to every member world. The door opened and Ambassador Hyojin entered, followed by 2 Union security officers. "The transport is ready," she said. "We leave for the council station in 2 hours." Daehyun nodded. He felt nervous, though he wasn't the one testifying. He, Jiwon, and Lyra would be there to support Torval. But the warrior would stand alone before the council, facing the leaders of his own government and hundreds of other species. "Is he ready?" Hyojin asked. "As ready as he can be." They found Torval in the quarters he now shared with his small family, sitting with Lyra. She was showing him a drawing she had made, a picture of their family. 4 figures stood together, 2 tall and 2 shorter. The colors were bright, hopeful. "This is us," she said proudly. "Our family." Torval held the drawing carefully as if it were precious. "It is beautiful, little one. May I keep it?" "You can keep it while you talk to the big people tomorrow." "For courage, thank you. I will treasure it." Lyra hugged him tightly. She understood in her own way that tomorrow would be difficult, that her father would have to remember painful things and speak about them to strangers. But she also understood that it was important, that it mattered. The journey to the council station took 8 hours through jump gates. The station itself was enormous, a massive structure that housed representatives from over 300 species. Daehyun had never seen anything like it. The architecture blended styles from countless worlds, creating something entirely unique. They were given secure quarters in the diplomatic section. That night, none of them slept well. Daehyun found Torval standing at the window at 3 in the morning, looking out at the stars. "Can't sleep?" Daehyun asked quietly, joining him. "Too many thoughts." Torval's skin patterns were dark, troubled. "Tomorrow I will speak against my own government, against beings I once served with. Some of them were friends. You're doing the right thing. I know, but that does not make it easy." He touched the window with one hand. "I keep thinking about the beings who died on Tarash, about how they must have felt in those final moments, confused, afraid, not understanding why this was happening to them. That's why you have to testify, so everyone knows what happened, so it can never happen again." Torval looked at him. "You have such faith in justice, Daehyun, such belief that speaking truth will change things, don't you?" "I want to. But I have seen too much corruption, too much power protecting itself." He was quiet for a moment. "If I fail tomorrow, if the council does nothing, promise me you will take care of Lyra. Raise her as your own. Teach her to be better than I was. You're not failing anyone, and you're a great father." Daehyun put his hand on Torval's shoulder. "But yes, I promise. If anything happens, Lyra will always have a home with me. Thank you, my friend." "My brother." The word surprised Daehyun. In all these months, Torval had called him many things. Teacher, provider, family head, but never brother. "Brother?" Daehyun repeated softly. "Yeah, I like that." The next morning came too quickly. They dressed in formal clothing. Torval in traditional Velkari robes that marked his former rank. Daehyun and Jiwon in neat Earth-style suits. Lyra wore a small dress that Jiwon had bought for her, with patterns that reminded Daehyun of both Korean and Velkari designs. The council chamber was breathtaking, circular and vast, with seats rising in tiers all around a central platform. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the seats, their varied forms and colors creating a living rainbow. At the highest level sat the Council of 7, the most powerful beings in the Union. Daehyun, Jiwon, and Lyra were seated in a special section for family and supporters. Below them on the central platform, Torvald stood alone. He looked small in that massive space, one being against the might of governments and bureaucracies. The head counselor, a being that looked like living water held in humanoid shape, called the session to order. We are gathered to hear testimony regarding the events on the colony world of Tirash. Torvald of the Velkari, formerly fleet commander of the Imperial Navy, has brought evidence of war crimes committed by his government. We will hear his testimony, examine the evidence, and determine appropriate action. The Velkari delegation sat in their section, 3 officials in military dress. They watched Torvald with cold hatred. Torvald began to speak. His voice was steady, controlled, but Daehyun could hear the emotion beneath it. He described his orders in detail. He explained his refusal and the consequences. Then he presented the evidence, data recordings of the planned attack, communications between commanders, tactical assessments that coldly calculated how many civilians would die. The chamber was silent as images played on screens throughout the room. Teresh before the attack, beautiful cities, advanced for their level of technology, markets filled with beings going about their daily lives, children playing in streets, then Tarash after, rubble, ash, silence. 5,200,000 beings died in the attack, Torvald said, his voice breaking slightly. Killed not because they were enemies, but because they were in the way. Because my government wanted their world and saw them as obstacles to be removed. One of the Velkari officials stood up. This is propaganda and lies. Tarash was a military threat that required elimination. This traitor fled his duty and now spreads falsehoods to justify his cowardice. Sit down, the head counselor said firmly. You will have your chance to respond. The official remained standing. The Velkari Empire will not be judged by this council. We are a sovereign nation. What we do within our own territory is not subject to Union law. Genocide is subject to all law, the counselor replied. Now sit or you will be removed. The official sat, but his expression promised violence. Torvald continued his testimony for 2 more hours, answering questions from various counselors. He was calm, precise, never exaggerating or speculating. He simply stated facts, backed up by evidence that couldn't be denied. Finally, it was time for the Velkari government to respond. Their lead representative, an older warrior with scars covering half his face, approached the platform. Torvald was once a great commander, he said. But he broke under the pressure of command. He refused lawful orders and fled like a coward, stealing classified data. He now tries to make himself look like a hero by painting his government as evil. But the truth is simple. Tarash was hostile. They were developing weapons. The attack was necessary self-defense. Do you have evidence of these weapons? A counselor asked. That information is classified for security reasons. How convenient, another counselor said dryly. The Velkari representative continued, but his arguments were weak, contradicted by the evidence Torvald had presented. After another hour of debate, the council called a recess to deliberate. Daehyun met Torvald in a private room. The warrior looked exhausted, drained by the emotional weight of reliving those events. You did amazing, Jiwon said. You were clear, honest, and powerful. Lyra climbed into her father's lap and hugged him tightly. You were brave, father. So brave. Torvald held her close, and Daehyun saw tears in his eyes. Thank you, little one. I did it for you. So you can grow up in a galaxy that values life. They waited for 3 hours before being called back to the chamber. The Council of 7 had reached a decision. The head counselor stood, and the entire chamber fell silent. The council has reviewed the evidence presented by Torvald of the Velkari. We have examined the data, verified its authenticity, and considered all testimony. Our conclusion is unanimous, he paused, and the moment stretched out. The attack on Teresh constitutes a clear violation of Union law regarding the protection of developing civilizations. It meets the legal definition of genocide. The Velkari government is hereby found guilty of war crimes. Chaos erupted in the Velkari section. Officials shouted, some stood as if to leave. But Union security moved to block the exits. The penalties are as follows, the counselor continued. Economic sanctions against the Velkari Empire will begin immediately. All military cooperation with Union forces is suspended. The Empire is removed from the Council of Spacefaring Nations and will not be eligible for reinstatement until a new government is formed that renounces these actions and agrees to union Oversight. The lead Velkari official stood again. You cannot do this. We are a sovereign power. You were a member of this union by choice. That membership comes with responsibilities. You have violated those responsibilities in the most severe way possible. The counselor looked directly at the Velkari delegation. Your government has 1 year to comply with these sanctions and make reparations to the survivors of Tarash. If you do not comply, military intervention will be authorized. He turned to Torval. As for you, Torval of the Velkari, this council formally recognizes your courage in speaking truth against your government. Your refugee status is made.